Ready to go?
Ready to go.
My name is David Olbrich, and this is September 6th, 2007. What is your full name, sir?
Walter John Wagner.
And where and when were you born?
Madison, Wisconsin, February 7th, 1918.
And which squadron were you attached to?
The 515th.
Before the war started, what was it like living in Wisconsin during the Great Depression?
I was peddling papers for a living and working at a filling station for 25 cents an hour. Worked my way through college for $3 every Sunday.
Do you think that the hardships you faced in the Great Depression strengthened you for your war effort?
Well, I was in a family of 7 children, and for that reason, I was supported by my family, and I had to walk to school about a mile, University of Wisconsin, and after 4.5 years, I finally got my degree in mechanical engineering, Bachelor of Science, and that opened up the world to me once I got my degree, because when Pearl Harbor started, I had a college degree, which made me eligible for engineering cadets, and then I became a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, then major, and eventually I retired as a lieutenant colonel.
So do you recall where you were or what you were doing when you heard about Pearl Harbor or heard Franklin Roosevelt's speech?
One of the other cadets that went through training with me provided transportation for me to go to California and to report to my first station, which was Mather Field, California. But when Pearl Harbor happened, we were enjoying life in San Diego, and there was a complete blackout, and we had to get in our car and start driving to our bases. I went to Mather Field. He went up north to another city in Northern California.
So you had joined before Pearl Harbor then? Joined the U.S. military before?
Yeah, I was already a cadet, and when I got to Mather Field, I was a second lieutenant.
All right. During your, what were your basic training, or what was your training like, either in basic training or then your advanced training and maintenance or mechanics in the military?
Well, I was recruited while I was a senior in college by both the Air Force, Army Air Corps, and the Navy. And while I was waiting to be called up, I was drafted. And I didn't have to go to basic training in the Army, but I elected to do so. So I spent about 6 months in basic training. Where was it? In Kansas, I guess. And then I went from there. I was called up for cadet training at Chanute Field. That was mechanical aircraft mechanic school, Chanute Field. And it was from there that I went out to California on my first assignment.
So you were stationed in California when Pearl Harbor occurred. How did you end up going from California on the West Coast all the way over into Europe or North Africa or Italy? How did that happen?
Let me think now. I was assistant post engineer at Mather Field, California, and then I was in charge of small aircraft, like a squadron engineer, And then from then let me think. Oh, they wanted to put me in charge of mechanic school, like community college, in charge of aircraft training for pilots, navigators, bombardiers, WASP, the Women Auxiliary Service. And I wasn't born to be an educator, and I didn't like the idea. I could have got promoted overnight to major if I had taken the job, but I told the post commander that I'd rather go overseas than to go into this training. I was assistant in charge of training when that happened. They wanted to make me in full charge. And I said, I'd rather go overseas in combat than do that. So I ended up in Italy.
In Italy. And about what year did you get to Italy?
I was in Italy from mid-44 to mid-45.
All right. When you were in Italy, you said you were flight operations officer?
I was a squadron engineering officer in charge
engineer.
of maintenance of about 10 B-24s.
That's a lot of responsibility. What did the typical grounds crew look like? How many men were in a typical grounds crew for, say, one of those B-24s?
There were only about 4 or 5 people that were responsible for each one. Like they had the crew chief and then about 4 assistants.
And was the crew chief an officer or a senior non-com?
Senior non-com.
And so by then you must have been, what, a first lieutenant or a captain?
I was a captain then.
All right. How many, did those 5 men maintain one craft at a time?
Right.
What was your typical workday or their typical workday like? You must have been working 24 hours a day when things needed to be done.
Well, every morning we'd get up early to support a mission, and I'd go out with my Jeep. I had a Jeep assigned to me, and I'd go from one plane to another and make sure that it was ready for takeoff.
So so you sort of inspected the planes.
Yeah, we had an inspector also, but I just oversaw the inspector and all the other ones that were in charge of maintenance.
So you would have gone down a checklist to make sure that the gas tanks are full, and
Yeah.
What other sort of things did you look for?
Little things like checking the tires to see that they weren't cut by these cans that they threw out when they landed, the empty cans with sharp blades, and they'd cut into the tires. Or I'd wiggle the ailerons in the elevators to make sure there wasn't too much play, and I'd make believe I was important to the operation.
Sounds there's like a lot of inspections going on, because I know the pilots would do their walk around and do a visual inspection, but you were tugging on things and making sure that everything was just so.
And then we had an inspector too.
What were in Italy? What were the worst problems you faced in maintaining and repairing aircraft? Like, something like, were spare parts a problem? Was it battle damage? Was it weather conditions? What were your worst?
There was a lot of flak damage on the aircraft after each mission. And after they came into the revetments, I guess they called them, I'd inspect them for flat damage. And if it was something my own crews couldn't maintain, there was a service squadron. And I got real friendly with the people that ran the service squadron, and I would have the pilots taxi the aircraft over to be fixed at the service center. and I would reward them with flight equipment or something. I'd always be, you know, working my way in with them,
Well, you had to be something of a
bribing
wheeler,
them, in other
a
words,
wheeler dealer, a scavenger, you know.
because I wanted to have the highest in commission rate in the whole group, which happened. My squadron had the highest in commission rate of the whole group.
Outstanding. So it was a lot of flak damage. What were the you said that if your own crews, your 4 to 5 man crews couldn't fix something, what couldn't they fix? For example, let's say that the bomb doors were frozen, and so they dropped the bombs through the bomb bay doors.
That'd go to the service squadron.
So it's more, that was
to
almost
be
like
replaced,
like
yeah.
almost collision stuff. Like in terms of fixing a car, that'd be more kind of collision stuff.
In
then.
some cases where the engines were overpowered for too long, we changed out as many as 4 engines on one craft overnight. All 4 engines overnight.
And that would have been your own crews,
Yeah,
not the service
that one
squad.
crew chief would be responsible for that. And he and his, I sometimes was helped by putting in a spark plug or something, just to make myself useful.
That's a lot of work. So then your crews would have been working conceivably all night to get something ready
That's
to go
right.
the next day.
That's right.
And then, in terms of the mechanical problems, what were some of the mechanicals? Did you have problems often with hydraulics or with electronics?
Well, in some cases, the pilots, the first thing we did when they landed was check the write-up by the pilot as to what he thought went wrong during the flight. And a lot of times it would be a fuel leakage. They smell gas inside the plane. So I would get in the plane with the crew and we'd take a flight to verify what the crew said was true. And if it was, we'd have to change out some fuel tanks.
In terms of making those kind of changes, those kinds of repairs, what was the biggest pain in your neck in terms of making repairs, or for your grounds crews? What was the toughest thing to fix?
Well, sometimes when the planes landed, they would go off the runway and we would try to pull them out with a tractor, and the nose wheel would collapse. And we'd have to change out the nose wheel. That was a big problem.
Yeah. How long, for example, you said that sometimes your crew chief would be responsible to change out an engine. How long would it take to lift one engine out and put another engine in and get it all bolted down? About how long might that take?
It must have been not more than a couple hours because they changed out all 4 engines overnight with just one crew.
Was that every aircraft that they did? Or
that didn't happen very often, but that was just one of the worst occasions.
One of the things that's always interested me is if you're going to have, your squadron, 10 aircraft available for flight, you needed to have spare parts. Did you get your spare parts and your replacement parts on time? For the most part, was the logistics good on your end to get your spare parts?
It was in our case because we would cannibalize other aircraft that were unable to fly. If we needed a spare part for a plane that we wanted to fly, we'd take them off of this plane that was grounded. So we never had a spare part problem.
And excuse me. Did you could you maybe speak to the reliability or the I guess how good was the B-24? Did you have a chance to work with B-17s or other aircraft maybe along the way? How did the B-24 rank as in terms of ruggedness or in terms of maintenance? Or can you speak to that?
we had no problem with maintenance. On one occasion, though, during the holiday season, there were several aircraft that had been forced down in northern Italy, and they needed a crew of people to go up and get them in a flyable condition. So they assigned me in charge of a group of mechanics. We got into a Jeep, we drove up, and we took one at a time, and I picked out the worst one. We had a colored service group up nearby where we could get parts if we needed them. And the one I recall most vividly is we had to replace the whole rear empennage of one aircraft, and we cannibalized one off another aircraft and hauled it down a mountain road in a big flatbed. And I had such an experienced crew, they were able to take all the cabling and electrical systems, you know, and get it all put back together, and we got it ready to fly, and a crew came up and flew it back to its squadron, wherever it happened to be.
That must have been a real challenge. So you're basically out in the
And
countryside doing this, where away from your regular, you know, set
yeah,
of equipment.
our team got a commendation for that, for bringing several aircraft back into commission that normally wouldn't be flyable again. Some of them had to have engine changes, but the one with the rear empennage, the whole rear empennage, that was really something, you know, with the big rudders, vertical stabilizers and all.
That must have been a big job. Did you deal with any of the problems or malfunctioning with any of the weapons, or would that have been the armament
Yeah,
personnel's?
they were a separate group. We didn't have much contact with them. They had their own job to do.
All right, so your men would have been working all night. Did you work all night with them as needed?
Normally not. Usually after a mission, we would go to the bar and have a few drinks, because everybody would be uptight, you know, after a dangerous mission, and maybe some of them would have had a lot of flak damage on their aircraft. And we're either celebrating for new crews coming in, or we're celebrating for other crews going back home after 50 missions. So there was a lot of celebration.
All right, so in the morning, you're going through the last minute inspections. You're inspecting, your inspector's inspecting, the pilot's inspecting. They take off. When would they have usually taken off? It
would be about daylight.
So 5, 6
There was
p.m.
only one pre-daylight mission that was on southern France, and one of our aircraft blew up. It wasn't from our squadron, but it blew up at the end of the runway because the pilot lifted the wheels too quick and it mushroomed in. And I vividly remember jumping under my Jeep because I could see all these parts flying over my head, coming down on top of me, you know. And they got some sweepers out there. They swept the runway, and then they started taking off again. It was one of the first aircraft that was, and there were 4 groups in the area, and I saw explosions at each one of them, where an airplane had blown up on takeoff, just because of inexperience at, you know, nighttime takeoffs.
So then, all right, so you would have gotten them on the runway, and then they take off. Then once the B-24s departed, they might be gone 10, 12 hours if it's a longer mission. What did you and your crews do during that time? Were you able to get some rest?
Well,
or did you go back to work?
There'd be other aircraft that we were working on to get them back into commission. So
you're just working all the time.
Yeah, we never really got any rest during the daytime, no.
And then, so then they would come back. The B-24s would start returning maybe early afternoon, late afternoon, depending on how long the mission was. And then that's when you went when they returned, that's when you went to the officers club or to the NCO
Yeah,
club. Or
on one occasion, I was visiting another base when the aircraft came in, and one of them blew up on landing for some unknown reason. I never found out much about it, but the whole crew was killed right there on the runway.
how close a relationship or friendship, if you will, did you or your grounds crews develop with the flight crews that were flying your airplanes?
They were pretty much segregated, like the staff, like the intelligence officer, the maintenance officer, we had barracks to sleep in, whereas the crews slept in tents. And the same way with the ground crews, they slept in tents too. So their living conditions weren't as good as ours. We had little gasoline-fired heaters in our barracks where we could light up and keep warm. That was one way we kept warm.
Well, one of the things I've seen in the pictures, and it snowed in southern Italy. And when you think of the Mediterranean, you think, oh, the French Riviera or whatever, it's always warm. But it could get cold and snow where you were.
Yeah, I have a picture, December, I guess it could have been the 1st of January, where the crews got out and built a snow woman, not a snowman, but a snow woman, a big-breasted woman, and it was surrounded by airmen around it. And I have a picture of it upstairs in my room. That was kind of fun.
So that brings me to another question. You were working really hard, and your men were working really hard, and there's a lot of stress there to make sure the aircraft are going. What did you do for fun, or what did you do for recreation when you had a little bit of time?
Since I was one of the few that had transportation, a Jeep, they would load up in my Jeep and we'd drive into, we were at San Pancrazio, we'd drive into Lecce, I think it's called. It's the center of the boot, the center of the heel of the boot. And we would dance with the ladies. All the women that came with their mothers, the mothers wouldn't let their girls out of sight for fear of some problems, So we would drink a lot of vino and have fun, and then we'd drive back.
How often did that sort of thing happen? How often were you able to?
Well, whenever there was a stand down, when they weren't flying the next day, we could do that, yeah.
About how often did weather interfere with flight?
I don't remember that the weather really affected many of the flights. It was comparatively good over there. Now, one of my passengers when we went was an assistant intelligence officer by the name of Warren Avis, the rental car king. And he and I got real chummy over there because he was using me for transportation, and he joined me coming back. What was it, the West Point, or someone probably told you already what ship we came back on, but we played cribbage all the way back, and then when we got to Chicago, we split up, and he went back to his home, and I went to my home.
And when did you get back stateside? When that voyage occur?
It was mid 45.
So after VE Day, after Victory in Europe Day, after May.
Yeah, the Europe war ended while we were en route back home, getting ready to be retrained on B-29s to go to the Far East. We got out to Kansas or wherever, and were retrained on B-29s. Then the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so they split up the group there, and I ended up in counterintelligence and went over to Europe after that.
That was kind of a jump, wasn't it? Going from, you know, uh, maintenance to counterintelligence.
Anyhow, what I didn't tell you when we were in Italy, we were refueling an aircraft after a mission, and the fuel truck caught on fire, and it was right under the aircraft, of course, and we were afraid that it was a mission where it was an aborted, where all the bombs were aboard the planes, and we knew we had to get that truck away from the aircraft, or the aircraft would blow up and the whole damn base would blow up with all those bombs aboard, you know. And my crew chief and I, we jumped up on the fuel truck. I don't know where the driver was, and we moved the fuel truck away from the aircraft. And then by that time, the people in the tower saw what was going on, and they sent fire trucks over and they put it out. The whole back end of the truck was on fire. The rubber was melting on the tires and all that. And we were given a soldier's medal for that. They awarded me at first, but I said, hell no. The whole crew assisted me in this, so they all should get the soldier's medal. So we were all awarded the soldier's medal, the whole crew.
So was that sort of the closest call you had, or was that one of the closest calls you had?
Probably so, because that truck could have exploded right in our face while it was burning there, you know.
A couple of more questions for you, sir. To what degree did you or the grounds crew kind of wait around when they knew the flights were supposed to be returning, the B-24s were supposed to be returning to base after the mission? You know, were you waiting on the tarmac or the runway for them to land?
Yeah, we were. We just waited, yes.
Kind of looked through binoculars and counted and that sort of thing. So you would have had I guess, a vested interest.
Yeah, we wanted to know if any of ours wasn't returning, you know.
You got kind of attached to the plane and to the men that flew it.
Right.
Very good, very good. You were overseas for an extended period of time, and did you receive many letters from home, or did you write many letters home?
I really didn't communicate too much with my family, I don't think, at that time. I was from a family of 7. It would have been hard to communicate with all of them. I had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. But I didn't do much writing, no.
Right.
My parents were elderly by the time I was born. I say elderly, they were a lot younger than I am now, but in those days, you know, people died off 10, 20 years younger than we do today. And I didn't have any girlfriends, so I didn't have any girlfriends to write to.
So where were you and what were you doing when you heard the news that the war was over in Europe? Do you recall sort of what was going on?
We were on a ship coming home when the war ended in Europe.
I believe that the 376th stopped its combat missions in mid-April, April 15th, April 18th, something along those lines. And so you would have been getting ready to ship back at that point?
Right. There's a history book in the other room that gives the exact date of the last mission. There were over 400 missions, I believe.
Yeah, very impressive number, 451, I think.
Yeah.
And then you got back stateside, went to Kansas to start learning about the B-29, the Super Fortress. Did you learn enough about that aircraft to be able to compare it with the B-24 in terms of its structure or its, hydraulic system or anything like that? Can you make any kind of comparisons?
What happened was they assigned me as, what do they call it? The guy in the tower that in charge of the whole flight line. I was a flight maintenance officer or something, and whenever aircraft took off for landing, I was responsible for sending maintenance crew out to receive it, and that's a job I had when they finally just dispersed everybody, and I was reassigned to counterintelligence it was more like technical intelligence. And since I had an engineering degree, they put me in technical intelligence.
And then how long did you stay? Did you stay in the Air Force then? Was that?
I stayed for 21 years. Yeah,
active duty?
My last 10 years were in nuclear weapon type assignments.
So that would have been what, I don't know, 55 to 65, somewhere in that time frame, or?
Let's see.
I'm forcing you to do math. I'm sorry.
I went to Germany in 46 and was over there until June of 49, and that's when I got married. I came back after serving 3 years. I was there during the Nuremberg trials and during the Berlin airlift. I was in London for 6 months. And once I got married, I got assigned to all kinds of weapons work, nuclear weapon type work. I was sent to special nuclear weapons school and then out to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Sandia Base was the nuclear weapons center there, and then up to Los Alamos. I worked on the plutonium and uranium, the heart of the bomb, in other words. Did maintenance on that, an enclosure, you know. And that was a pretty interesting assignment. And then I was in charge of FIT teams. It's a forward inspection team for nuclear weapons, where we were responsible for maintenance of the weapon before it was loaded on the aircraft. We were responsible for loading the weapons, and our mission at one time was to fly over to the aircraft would fly over to Africa, and we would fly over with the weapons in transport aircraft. We'd load the weapons, and then they'd go on to targets. But it never happened that way. We never actually had to do that. But that's what would have happened if we had gone to war with Russia.
Well, I'm just about finished here, and I just wanted to know if you had anything you'd like to add, or any other stories or memories that jump to your mind.
Well, I was in charge of plans, programs, and requirements in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on a base that was responsible for adapting all of the aircraft in inventory to nuclear weapons. And that was a good assignment. It was a lieutenant colonel assignment, and I was only a major at the time, but I retired as a lieutenant colonel. But since I was non-rated, I didn't have pilot, and I was kind of discriminated against, I think, and I had to get out. So when I got to Florida, I went to work for Pan American Airways for 2 years, in charge of logistics planning for the Apollo program, selecting temporary facilities until the permanent facilities were constructed, like the Vertical Assembly Building, which is one of the biggest buildings in the world. And after 2 years, I saw that the job was fast ending. So I got a flight to Europe with my wife, a 90% discount. And we toured all over Europe while we were over there and came back. And then just before that, I was selected for a civil service job by the space program. So I accepted that, and I had all kinds of assignments in civil service, including auditing. Um, it was quality control, quality engineering. I guess the auditing job was the most important one because I had to audit all of the contractors, all the civil service organizations. See, I had a team assigned to me to do that, so it wasn't just me alone.
So this was NASA. You were working for NASA then.
Yeah, Kennedy Space Center. But I got 23 years with them, and I had 44 years government service when I finally retired with double pneumonia. I decided, I was 67 years old. I decided it's time to get the hell out of here before I die.
Well, I very much appreciate your willingness to spend time with us and very much enjoyed your memories. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.